Good morning. It's my pleasure to call to order the 9:30 City Council meeting of May 22nd, 2020. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Mayor Go.
Here.
Vice Mayor Parlier.
Here.
Councilmember Rivera.
Here.
Councilmember Gonzalez.
Here.
Councilmember Weir. And Councilmember Smith.
I'm here.
Councilmember Freeman.
Here.
And Councilmember Sullivan.
Thank you. As you're aware, on March 4th, the governor declared a state of emergency in California due to the threat of COVID-19. The governor also passed several executive orders, including the suspension of some components of the Brown Act related to the public meetings like this. And as such, Councilmember Smith is participating by phone, and I believe Councilmember Weir also will be joining us. Due to the governor's executive order, which waived the Brown Act provisions requiring physical presence of the public in light of the COVID-19 pandemic, public comments have been encouraged to be made by mail and phone call to the city clerk. Those received in such manner have been provided already to the council. Madam Clerk, do we have any public speakers here today?
None at this time, and no correspondence has been received through email or through the hotline.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Under workshops, we have City Council priority setting.
Thank you. City Manager Clerk, please.
Yeah, good morning, Mayor and Council. A couple of quick notes, and then I'll jump into some framework for our conversation today. We had wanted to create, a little less formal of an environment with the need to be able to have folks on the phone. That's why we've got microphones and things, because if you don't speak into the microphone, it'll be hard. It'll be hard for Councilmember Smith or Weir to hear us on the phone. So the microphones will be useful in that vein. And then I wanted to just set a little bit of a stage of some of my thinking about priority setting and goal setting. I've talked about this, I think, with each of you individually, but my vision in the longer term would be that we would have an annual process that we would take probably a half day, maybe even a full day, have a facilitated workshop with a facilitator that has designed that meeting to walk through the goals and spend some time thinking about some big picture items as well as digging into the goals themselves. Typically, in my experience, that's well done early in a calendar year so that then staff can take that information and create the department activities in support of those goals in advance of the budget process so that that's fed into the budget so that we can set aside those dollars for that. This year, because of COVID and other issues, this is a bit of an abbreviated session, but it'll still be really helpful, I think, to think about what the council's priorities are within the goals, help us reflect on that going into our budget workshops next week and in June, and then into next year. I would recommend, because it is a little bit of a timing constraint, my recommendation on the 8 goals is I think these 8 goals are solid, and I wouldn't recommend a lot of council discussion about should we change entire goals, the high-level 8 goals. That might be a ripe conversation, next spring. And these goals have, largely been in place for some time, and I think they serve pretty well as overarching goals. But then, really, the thought is to look at the action items underneath each of the 8 goals. The document that you have in front of you is a pretty extensive document. A lot of work went into it from staff, and so I want to thank Brianna and others for helping compile this. It has updates on the department activities and actions within each of the 8 goals over this past year. What's also in this document are some thoughts and recommendations about what might be additional new actions underneath the 8 goals, as well as department activities underneath those 8 goals. But I would say also my intent is to listen closely today. We have staff here taking notes on council feedback. We would then take all of that council feedback and go back and work with departments and develop even additional department activities that would be in support of where council wants to head on each of these goal action areas, and come back and say, you know, here's our business plan as staff to get at these action items underneath your goals in this coming year. So some of that is reflected, excuse me, some of the early thinking is reflected in this document about where we could head with some of these goals, but there would be other work with staff after this meeting to come up with, you know, plans and ideas in support of where council wants to head with these goals. So with that, I think we can actually jump into the documents. Yeah, go ahead, Ruth.
Let me
Sorry.
clarify just how this is going to work, just because this is a very awkward.
This isn't a technical. Look, I can't hear you because you're too close to the microphone.
Oh.
If you back off, it becomes better.
Okay.
I'm having a hard time because you're so close.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's basically what I wanted to address today, because this is a different kind of setting. So I will try to call on you, and just like we do when you raise your hand, I'm going to try to look for you. If somebody sees that somebody has their hand raised and I don't, that is a better one. We're going to do it just like the way we do at League of California Cities, because then I can actually see in the front. So if you want to speak, do that, right? Because I just can't really even see you, Councilmember Rivera, when you raise your hand over here. So just do that and then just put it down. We do that at League and it's pretty easy. And then I will stop periodically and ask for Councilmember Smith whether you want comments. Oh, sorry. Whether you want comments or Councilmember Weir, have you joined us yet? No. Okay, so City Clerk, when he does, will you just let him know that I'm going to try to stop periodically? I think that should work. And Councilmember Freeman, how is that? I'm trying to...
So you're back there, it's fine.
Fine, okay, we got it. All right.
For me, it's hard.
I'm going to stay right there. All right, so is there anything further presentation now?
Yeah, just a couple points. You do have two documents in front of you. One is a summary sheet just of all of the goals and action items. It's just 2 pages so that you can refer to those quickly and easily as a high-level document as we're digging into some of the details on the other document. But then there's just a couple of things to point out in particular about the document itself. The details for each of the goals has some color-coded indicators there. So red text indicates department activities that have been completed and we're proposing, you know, then to be removed because they're complete. The blue text, those are ideas that staff is bringing forward and proposing as new activities in support of the goals. Given that this is, you know, my first opportunity to weigh in on this, I actually proposed a couple of the larger categories called the actions. Those are the, you know, big categories within each goal. Typically, we don't change those as much as we change the department activities year over year, but I did, based on my own thinking as well as feedback I've received from council, added a couple actual action areas, and we'll see those as we walk through each section. And then the status updates themselves, there is a color coding there where if it's a green, that means that item has been completed. Blue, it's something that's in progress or ongoing, and there are some pink items that are still pending that, you know, there are some reasons we haven't started on some of those areas. With that, if I could just draw your attention to the third page that is I'm holding it up here for those, it's just this high-level percentage chart of where we're at on the goals. We included this just because it's consistent with what we've showed in the past. You can see there that, you know, there are very few goals that have not been started. A majority of goals are in progress, and a third chunk of those goals as of today in May that have been completed. I think because we're going to get into the details, I don't want to linger on this page too much. It was meant to, you know, give a summary look. And then ready to start digging into the goals themselves and some of the discussion. So I think there's 2 ways that we could go about this, and open to feedback on that. Yeah, I think it would serve us fairly well to kind of go, page by page and look at these goals. Some of them may warrant a lot of discussion. Some of them are going to go pretty quickly. The second option is that, because this is intended to be an informal workshop, we don't have all day. We could also zone in and target those topics that are of most interest to council, and we'll kind of track which ones we've talked about, and then if we have additional time, we'll go back and talk about others. But I would actually kind of put that out there for mayor and council. Do we want to go line by line, or do we want to focus in on the areas that you are most interested in?
Thank you, Mr. Clegg. Welcome, Councilmember Sullivan, 941. Councilmember Gonzalez.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't have a response for the city manager's question. I just wanted to ask a question regarding the progress report of the goals, and so when it's appropriate, I'll pose that question. Is it?
Council members, do you have a response to the city manager's question? Any preference? See, we have none. Councilmember Smith, any preference?
I'm not hearing real well. I'm not sure if, how close anybody is to the microphone. I hear the mayor pretty well, but city manager was a little muffled when he was speaking, and so I didn't really get the question.
Go ahead and repeat that, please.
So the question, Councilmember Smith, is whether we go line by line through each of the goals, starting in number 1 all the way through number 8, or do we focus in on the interest areas of council first and then come back to other topics?
I'm open. Yeah, I don't have preference.
I'd recommend that the staff just go through line by line.
Yes.
for each goal. And so, may I?
Yes, you may.
Okay, I just want to start with that first page. It's actually page 3 in the presentation where staff outlines different percentages. How are these percentages calculated? So if we look at goal number 8, invest in urban revitalization and downtown development, it shows the May report in progress is 70%. Does that mean 7 out of the 10 department activities are in progress? Or I'm just trying to get clarity in my mind what these percentages actually mean. Like, how are they actually calculated? If somebody can walk me through that.
Yeah, so, and it may become clear as we start looking through some of the details, but your example was accurate. It does mean that 7 out of the 10 department activities are being worked on, but none of them for that particular goal have been totally completed.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Mr.
All
Clegg.
right, so let's dive in, and what I'll do is I'll take each one of these items and provide a high-level update. I'm not going to read to you everything that's in the report. We're happy to have presented this so folks can take this with them. But I'll give a high-level look at the status, and then if there's some desire to give additional direction or have some additional discussion, I'll pause after each one. So goal number 1, action 1.1, is to hire the 100 additional police officers. And this is one that has received a lot of discussion because it's one of the highest priorities for the city. And we have an academy that is just about to be completed. The next academy is going to be in the summer. They're actually authorized to have up to 50 spots. They're hoping for, they're planning and expecting for at least 40 individuals to be in another large academy. And then we'll have another winter academy that comes later this year. So with the PSVS funds, significant positions have been added, and we're making good progress towards that. One thing that I've been talking about with some of the members of our community have asked about this. When I was in Stockton, we hired 120 officers. It took us 4 years to get to a net gain that was more than 100. We also had many officers, leaving the department for retirements, as well as some leaving for other agencies in Stockton, and so we went through almost 400 hires to get to a net gain of 120. I don't anticipate that to be the case here in Bakersfield. BPD does not have the same turnover rates, but there will be retirements, and we actually had a pretty heavy number of retirements last year compared to the typical cycle for BPD. And so we have a fair number of vacancies right now that we're moving hard to continue this hiring process to make sure we move towards that net gain. So the one thing I would add here, of course, we made it an update that we completed the August 2019 Academy. We're just going to update that goal to reflect that we're going to complete additional academies this coming year. And then another thought is that with these tough economic times, we're going to look really hard at, is this an opportunity to go and recruit for more lateral hires, because the folks may be facing layoffs or cuts from other agencies, and there may be an opportunity for more folks that have a little more experience than a trainee coming in to pick them up. And so we're going to look on the HR side on recruitment, as well as have some additional conversations about incentive programs and whether the current incentive program is sufficient, or whether we do more to try and get more laterals in this current environment. And with that, I'll pause.
Mr. Clegg, I know that we've received some questions from our community about the net gain issue, and at this point, where are we in terms of net gain?
I don't have the specific number for you today, I was talking with Chief about this week and said we need to make sure we have this for our oversight committee meeting next Tuesday, and we can have that for you in the workshops next week. But I believe that our net gain is somewhere in the 20 to 30 range, just because we have lost lots of folks to retirements.
Thank you. Councilmember Freeman.
Quick question. Since the goal is 100 officers over 3 years, most people assumed it was about a 30-year. And that's what the public thinks, that's what a council member thinks. Okay, you get about 33 this year. The goal should be, what's the goal for this year? And then you might be ahead of the goal. But right now, the way you have it, it looks like you're way behind it. We don't know where you are. What were you trying to do this year? Hire 33? Looks like you're on track. It's a minor point. But the more, and that will apply as we move through in the goals, they need to be, in general, or at least in the action items, they need to be more specific. Because again, most of them are immeasurable. They're still kind of mom and apple pie, do a good job in recreation. No, we have to finish the park by X date. Things have to be concrete if they're goals in the public. And council members kind of expect, well, what are you really going to do this year? I'm going to get that park complete by July 1st. Put it down. Those just in general, things have to be specific so they're measurable.
And that is good feedback, and this is feedback that's been shared previously, and we've been thinking about and working on that topic. For the update today, I failed to mention that typically we have a couple other columns in this document that include the measures that we're going to use and the timeline for those, because we needed space to provide the text for what the contextual update was. When we come back to you with our plan for this coming year, with the details of the department activities, we'll put that timeline column and those measures columns in there to reflect some of those issues. I think also a piece of feedback I've continued to hear is that how do we really measure the impact, the outcomes of, are we really getting somewhere? And some of that, those impact and outcome measures are typically measured, at least a year is even in the short term, but sometimes it's 3 to 5 years of what are those true impacts and outcomes. And so we're already talking about putting some measures in place that we could say, this is how we're gonna measure our outcome, and then work towards those. But I think some of this data collection and measuring needs to be worked on as a starting point. So for this year's, because last year didn't have as many of those measures.
By the way, You keep moving closer and closer to the mic, it's harder and harder to understand you. Stay at least 12 inches back.
Trying to balance
There,
for
there,
Councilmember
there.
Smith and Councilmember Green.
Okay, my point is, in whatever charts we have, when we do our goals and when we update, you're updating the public on the goals, not just us.
Sure.
They need to be simple and specific. And my experience doing this 33 years is that people hate to be tied down, and they don't want to give you a specific date or a specific measure. You know, reduce burglaries by what percent? You know, put a goal out there, try to achieve it. There's no punishment for not getting it. It's like, what's a goal? We can build a work plan to get there. So we need to know this year, these are this year's goals, what do we want to get accomplished specifically, and then we try to build a work plan to do it, and we all learn together if we have the right strategy. But people will always, because you can't really measure with, well, it's a 3-year goal. I don't know what I'm supposed to get done. It has to be concrete enough so we know, did we get it done or not, and we need to change strategy if we didn't. It's not a punitive tool, it's a work tool for everybody, but you guys really do all the work. We just need to know, and the public, it's not just us. Hey, be nice though, hey, you know, we said we're gonna get burglaries down 10% and we did. Or, hey, we didn't, we did put more resources behind that so we can correct the strategy.
Even 1 year is a long time for the public to wait, because we get those questions on an ongoing basis, as I'm sure you do. So having something as to what Councilmember Freeman is talking about is extremely helpful, and then even knowing where we stand within a given period of time. Sometimes some goals are going to come in closer to the end, but just having an understanding of where we are relative to what we think we're going to achieve within a period of time would be beneficial. And then I just want to make sure, I know Councilmember Sullivan, you were a little late coming in. I can't see you there, so what we're going to do just to let me know that you want to speak is just to raise your card, and I can see that. Mr. Clay?
I would only just add that, again, we anticipate adding more measures to the goals this year in the plan that we bring back to council based on the feedback from today. And I think if council has an interest in suggesting some particular measures today, that's okay, but I don't actually recommend us trying to go for each line, picking the measure and the stat today for each of those. I think the important piece is to get the feedback of what's important and priority for council, and then as staff will, come back and say these are the ways that we think we're going to measure that and the activities we're going to do to support that.
Councilmember Gonzalez.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate what the city manager just said. I was actually going to mention something similar. I think it's important for us to really hone in on those outcome measurements, and just for information purposes, so that we know where we're headed, right? We have all these different action items that we've established, but how do we know which action items are actually going to get us towards the goals that we've set out? Some of them are obvious, right? 100 officers. But if we can at least establish for this year the baseline numbers, so where were we in the beginning of this year in terms of these stats? Gang violence, domestic violence, child abuse. And I'm perfectly comfortable having staff go back and establish those baseline numbers and whatever measurements there are for outcomes. Come to us as a council and present those and say, this is how we're going to measure our outcomes over time. And then we can have a clearer conversation about outcome measurements. I don't think it's productive to have that conversation now, but I'm eager to hear from staff what those outcome measurements might be, and then we can agree to use those and commit ourselves to those over the next 2-3 years.
Councilmember Smith, do you have any comments at this time?
I do not. Thank you.
Thank you. And has Councilmember Weir joined us yet? Thank you.
And Councilmember Weir messaged me that he'll get here as soon as he can.
Okay, thank you.
So with that, I will move to item 1.2. And I would say on this one, I think that the commentary about just measures in general applies in large portion to response times. The good news is that we've completed to the degree the recruitment for communications specialists and report technicians, that will take that off for next year. We just have one vacancy that is yet to be filled, but all others are filled. And then on our regional radio network, we've had some challenges with our partnership with the county. There were some lags there. And so once we have the go-ahead from the county, we'll be prepared to move forward in this next year on spending the funds to move in that direction. And then I think for the dispatchers, we have several vacancies. We're actually in a hiring process right now for dispatchers, and so we'll continue to track those until those are all filled for next year. Absent any questions? Oh, I see one question on the table.
Vice Mayor.
Thanks, Mayor. Am I good, Bruce?
Yeah, it's just working. It's better.
Good. Hey, I just want to back up real quick on 1.1. I mentioned this in the past, but there could be some other opportunities, especially when the city manager talked about potential laterals that may be looking at our city for a host of reasons, one being stability, because we know that some municipalities probably are really going to suffer through their finances with the COVID fallout. The 4-Out magazine, I mentioned it before, I think the HR and staff, but it's an opportunity to, if we advertise in there, it reaches probably 40,000 cops within the state. It's a way to brand us as a city, to show our stability, to show our professionalism as a police department, and I think it's an opportunity to maybe really do something special there. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Councilmember Rivera.
Thank you, Mayor. So I guess I have just a question. It occurs to me as we got to 1.2 and was reading 1.2C's progress, and you have here that you've filled 7 positions and there are 3 vacant, that I thought, so it seems to me that the mechanism for us achieving annual goals is kind of through our budget, or it is through our budget. I mean, that's where we put the resources behind you to get stuff done. What's the interplay, or how does this work in the context of the budget? It seems to me that most of these, as I look at them, even 1.1, when we say we've got 25 recruits recruited, graduating January 9, 2020, we've got 16 officers in July 2020, it's my assumption we've budgeted for some number of new officers, or we're relying on existing budgeted vacancies to fill. How does that interplay with this document?
I think the answer to that question is partly what was being discussed earlier, saying, how many were we trying to hire this year, and how many do we get to? And so that's not, here in this update, but what I can tell you on this specific goal is these are the number of PSVS positions we had for this year. So that's the good news, is we're hiring into those PSVS positions. But the net gain is, how many folks have retired or left on the back end. But this does reflect, the numbers that were budgeted for this year. We've pushed to hire the same number that we budgeted for on the police number.
Okay, right. So I guess I think an important metric, and I think to Bruce's and Andre's point, might be some recognition then of what in the current year's budget has been allocated to achieve this particular goal. And I guess I don't see that. I think that'd be helpful to have in the future.
Understood.
Vice Mayor, then Councilmember Freeman.
Thanks, Mayor. A couple of years ago, I think it was under a transportation officer is the title that we used for the position, especially with COVID in place. I know there's various safety protocols that the jail's employing now. And I don't know if there's a log jam, but I know log jams occur at the jail for booking, especially when you have a weekend and various departments showing up, from us, CHP, Sheriff's Department, and other agencies, that you can be basically stuck in line and you don't necessarily have the point of the spear out there as fast as you can, meaning our patrol officers. And the reasoning behind authorizing the transportation officer position was to alleviate that. You can basically do a handoff, with the paperwork to that person, and they can be the placeholder, the one in line, and process that person, or process the other people, and they can maintain the proper PPE they're available with them, and potentially I think it could cause a quicker turnaround to get our officers back on the streets. Thank you.
Councilmember Freeman.
Just a quick assumption. I'm going to assume that if you, when your goals are done, that you've incorporated those goals into your budget. Period. I trust you will do that, and if I don't need a tome on how you did it, you should be prepared to ask a question later. If Councilor Mayor has a question on it, I don't want a 1,000-page budget I have to read. But I think we'll all assume if you say that's a goal, you put the resource in the budget to do it. End of discussion.
I think fair enough, and I think there may be some particular instances. A few of the pending goals have had some COVID-related delays or some budget-related delays, and so we would call those out as exceptions, but unless called out, I think that's a fair assumption.
Councilmember Smith, anything? Okay, Mr. Clay?
All right, I'm going to go to page...
I do not.
I'm going to go to page 6 and item number 1.3. This is around using data-driven crime reduction strategies. The good news is that our crime analysts and lab analysts that were budgeted in the budget have been hired. On these other sort of special enforcement teams, we had a number of positions budgeted there, and we just have one still to be filled. Again, to Councilmember Rivera's point, we can include in the future how many do we budget so that you get a sense of that it's 5 of 6 or 6 of 7, but there were several positions here, only one vacant. Here's one of the ones I was just mentioning, the citywide camera project. That's something that has been on the books for some time. It was not funded in this last budget year. And unfortunately, just given the tightening of budgets, it's not included in next year's budget either. This is a fairly expensive project, and so we're going to continue to look for grant opportunities and leveraging opportunities, but at this point, it's an unfunded project. ShotSpotter, we do look to expand ShotSpotter in next year's budget, and the police department actually has negotiated a very favorable contract that gives us some flexibility there. Body-worn cameras, that's good news. That has been fully funded, and it's essentially fully deployed. There's just a handful of folks that still need to get their cameras, and it's just this next month, but that's a good win there. And then a new project that you see there is that I think that we can have a more focused effort around gun violence, group gun violence in particular, and there's a $1.5 million grant that we'll be applying for in this coming year around that. I'll pause there.
Vice Mayor?
Thanks, Mayor. Excuse me. I just have a brief comment on ShotSpotter. ShotSpotter was completely a council-driven item through the Safe Neighborhoods Committee. It went through there, and I just want to give a shout out to my colleagues, Andre, Willie, did some heavy lifting there, and it's been a great program, especially for the downtown area, and I look forward to be expanded at some point. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Councilmember Smith, do you wish to comment? Yeah, I don't see any other
I don't have
comments.
any. I'm a little slow responding because I'm unmuting every time.
Okay.
I would say I'm hearing everybody really well, but Christian Clay is still a little bit soft, and we can move the microphone a little closer to him. I appreciate it.
It makes it worse when he gets closer.
No, I like the volume.
Well, muffled.
All right, we will reach a happy compromise somehow.
I'll
Mr.
lean back,
Clay?
but talk louder.
Yes, if you can project a little bit more, just pretend you're on stage singing. All right, go ahead.
My ears have been around longer.
So item number 1.4, I think, frankly, my feedback on this one is it is definitely important to maintain our, ISO ratings. It is definitely important to pursue accreditation. This is one of those sort of, the first one is sort of an ongoing goal, and so I recommended that instead of just putting that in there each year as, hey, let's do this, let's take that one out because it's something we should just be doing. And then the accreditation is something that is far more measurable. Let's work towards that. Let's accomplish the accreditation. We're in good progress. I get weekly updates on the type of data that needs to be collected, and we've updated our collection systems to be able to collect that data. And the feedback from the fire chief is that not only is this, helping from a perception standpoint to show that we're an accredited agency, it's helping them think through important ways that they operate to make sure that we're doing the best that we can in fire, and it's helping them make some improvements internally. So I think it's a valuable effort to continue to move towards accreditation.
I don't see any requests to speak. Councilmember Smith?
I'm good, thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead.
So in 1.5, these ones again are a little bit challenging to measure in some ways as ongoing issues, but because there is a particular hazard mitigation plan update that we would like to keep that on there as a goal to work towards that particular update. And then we'll continue to work on training issues, but I think these are just good ongoing goals we're seeing progress on, and we'll work on some ways to think about more specific measures for those. For 1.6, I think this is an important area, and there's been really good work as a start in this area around just public education efforts, as well as I think community trust building. And so you'll see there that I've added a couple of recommendations already. I've had some conversations with Chief, and we're looking to use one of his command staff to create a position called, it's not a new authorized position, but taking one of his authorized positions, using a new title called a Chief Adjutant. And this would really be somebody who their job is to think about this public relations and this community trust building as a very specific focus, because it's that important. And then continuing to push on transparency and the availability of information online in advance, so folks don't have to come looking for information. We want to be transparent and have good public safety information out there. Is another project related to that, and I'll pause there.
Thank you. That's the end of the public safety. So let's take any comments related to this whole section. Councilmember Freeman.
Two clarifications. One is, I like the overarching goal and its specificity at the beginning. I think that's probably worth keeping, unless you want to modify it a little. But all of these sub-goals support that goal, because I can tell you the public expect, what I got all the calls on is, we've got to reduce burglaries, we got to reverse crime, we've got to reduce car thefts, the big crime activity, gang, but those are the things we all hear about, and those are, let's not lose that. That's the overarching goal, which is stated fine just now. I just don't want to lose that. But these are the ways you get it done, I understand. But in 1.2, I just didn't understand the impact statement where it said, the police department aims to reduce the citywide average response time to, is that 5 minutes, 30 seconds?
Correct.
Okay. I just wanted to be, just so I knew what it said. Thank you.
And I think,
and in the goals, we ought to say that what's our progress in, my other point was, in the progress, I don't think we ever referred to what we were trying to do and said, oh, we've reduced it to 6 or 4, how have we done? Because that was there, everybody's looking, hey, that's a concrete, and how did we do? So make sure that these updates kind of do refer back to what we said we were going to do. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Freeman. Councilmember Smith, anything related to public safety, this section?
Yeah, I just would reinforce the last on 1.6, the community engagement, I think social media that the police department is doing is great, and if you can focus more on that and get out in the community more with a specific position, I think that's a real positive. That is great. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Freeman, is that just from the past?
Nope.
Okay. Moving on now to the second section, and let's try this a little differently. Why don't you go ahead and do all of the goals, and then we can just do the questions at the end.
That works for me. I was going to do a quick time check, Mayor, so thank you. Okay, homelessness. We tackled public safety, now let's tackle homelessness. All in one day. Shelter capacity. So the good news is we've funded 40 beds at the center, we've funded 40 beds at the mission, the 150 beds at the county. The county is up and running. I think there's some conversation about encouraging our friends at the county to get folks into their new shelter. And then we also have our navigation center coming online this fall. And so I think overall, the number of beds, particularly the sheer number of beds in 1 year compared to before, this has been a huge undertaking. Then on our outreach services, you'll see there that our coordination with the continuum of care, we've completed some important things there, as well as the point in time count. We need to continue to work on issues around our rapid response team. And then one of the things I'm hearing is that our more chronic encampments that just keep coming back and are entrenched, how do we get at those issues and address those? And so you'll see that one addition there on 2.2. 2.3, again on the rapid response teams, that the app has been updated per that goal. That is complete. Also, we have a full team that is doing 7-day-a-week rapid response team. And then the internal tracking system for the rapid response team will be online this summer. So that will be complete soon, but it's not quite there yet. And then for 2.4, again on the continuum of care, that MOU with them is complete. We are advocating, continuously for the state funding. You can see there that we've included the numbers that we have received, which are significant, and the advocacy through the Big City Mayors Group turns into some very real dollars, millions of dollars in funding for homelessness. And then we again are continuing to allocate a fair number of our home and ESG dollars towards homelessness, a little bit less on the CBG side, but some of those dollars go there as well. At the very end of this homelessness section, you'll see here that I created a new action item that is, I've titled it as a recommendation to just increase the city's capacity to manage homeless priorities. We're looking, and the council approved an item at your last meeting for a job classification for a homelessness principal planner. That's to have an identified high-level position for somebody who's going to focus just on this issue. They're not going to be out there in the streets doing outreach. This is a position that's doing coordination of our contracts, coordination with our different partners at a high-level perspective, making sure this is all going in the right direction and we're keeping an eye on this issue collectively. And then with the creation of the Economic Development Department, homelessness would still be an element within the Economic Development Department, but have a distinct role and function with staff supporting that homelessness principal planner to make sure we're getting all of these contracts and funds in place. So with that, I think if I were to summarize the issue of homelessness, about getting our navigation center online. It's about coordinating in new and different ways with our partners to get at the entrenched homeless populations and using this new organization and staff to be the tip of the spear on the city's attention to making sure those things continue to happen.
Thank you. Councilmember Freeman and Councilmember Gonzalez.
One comment, question on the new goal that you added. Since now we will incorporate goals into budgets. Are you talking about hiring one person within the Economic Development Department to manage all our homeless activities, or one person and building a staff of additional people? That's, I would need to hear a lot more before a budget came forth of why we need a whole department. Maybe one person, or maybe it's a shared responsibility of somebody in the Economic Development Department, but I was a little confused as to the description.
No, that's a good question. So, and we haven't laid this out as specifically, and we'll come back and do this in the budget process, but if I could say a little bit about the department as a whole first, because I think it may help paint the picture for this one as well. So economic development, we're looking to have actually 4 different components of economic development. One will be the pure economic development that is traditional for cities. Another will be homelessness. Another will be the community and housing, community development and housing type aspect. This is, using our CDBG funds on an annual basis, basically what we've been doing all along. And then we also are going to look to have our Visitors and Convention Bureau and Arena be part of this package of Economic Development Department. All of those folks would be within economic development. So on the homelessness piece itself, we actually have, is it 4, Jackie, individuals? We have 4 individuals right now that are already on staff that handle our emergency shelter grants, our home grants, our CDBG grants, and disperse these funds to the different homeless and housing providers. So 2 of those individuals would remain working on CDBG and community development type issues. 2 of those individuals would focus more on affordable housing and homelessness. And so this homelessness principal planner, we're only adding 1 position, but 2 existing folks are just going to report to that individual.
Thank you. One other, since I think this is our opportunity to suggest new things that might be goals, and you'd have to have a budget. Next year, I would like to see us hire a planner like 5 or 6 years ago we had done, to do a new, I'll just call it for lack of a master plan for downtown. We started and then we dropped it 5 years ago or 6 when we said, we don't need money, so let's not. We'd already made some pretty good progress on the way a master planner blocks out streets and amenities and how we could make this a whole different downtown. And then everybody buys off, of course. But we don't have a vision for downtown. The vision is something really physical. Where are the new parks going? Where are the buildings going? Where are these it's concrete. And it takes a while to work up. But we got started, and we can hire the same one who knows Bakersfield fairly well. I don't know what they're called now. It used to be called Planning Center, but they're not. They're not. The guy named Randy Jack. He does 70% of their work is for cities and doing this kind of planning. But there are other people. I don't know if we could even get them. But we need to pick the process up again. The vision really gets pretty concrete if you want to say something. This is what our downtown's going to become, and people look at it like when we did a shopping center. We had color. This is what this thing. Wow! I want to rent from you there. It's a sales tool to bring people in, to bring companies in, to bring retailers in. Without it, you can't bring anybody in. So, I don't know, it costs $100,000. I don't know what it costs. Okay, check that out. But I would like to see that, if possible, in the budget and among the goals of the things that we begin. I don't care if we're in a COVID recession. These things take forever to get done anyway. They might as well get started on what we would like to see our downtown become.
Yeah, I've heard this same feedback. We'll speak to this more in goal number 8, but agree that this is
wherever you want to put it.
Yeah, this is an important element. I think just a couple of things to keep in council's purview. We have our economic development strategy that's going to be conducted through this next year. It won't answer all of that, but it will be a piece of it. And then we also have our general plan update, and a specific downtown element would be a piece of that. and then to continue to push on the downtown vision that was adopted in 2018. We take those three pieces and flesh out a more specific vision for downtown.
The sooner you get going on, I mean, this is a loose vision or master plan. It may affect your specific plan update. So it's important that we get that done. I know it's a multi-year process, but if it doesn't, what if we have to have a specific plan for downtown? I mean, so we better start thinking about this if we're involved in our total specific plan update.
Agreed.
Thank you, Councilmember Freeman. Councilmember Gonzalez.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to thank staff for developing the specific activity under 2.2 increased outreach services to include develop a program to proactively address chronic homeless encampment locations. You know, there have been a number of sites in my ward that I've been identifying and highlighting for staff on a regular basis. Golden State Mall, Garza Circle, Baker Street Corridor, California Real Road are just four of them. And we must be much more assertive. And that means, in my mind, it means two things initially. One, enforcement. Now that we have CalCop coming online, we have the M Street Navigation Center, we have beds available, and we have resources for individuals to go. We must include also that enforcement side. Individuals who are service resistant, who may not want to take up the offer, we have to have an enforcement component. But the second piece is coordination. It requires lots of coordination between the service providers who are out in the field, whether that be from behavioral health or flood ministries. But it seems like there's a significant amount of coordination required in order to really address these encampments. Flood, behavioral health, BPD, rapid response team. And I just wondered who specifically will be responsible for making those coordinated efforts and kind of identifying the times and locations. By the way, it has to be beyond 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. It has to be in the evenings. It has to be on the weekends. So who on staff will be responsible for that coordination piece?
I don't know today. Part of this goal is to get together and decide who that will be.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify, because as we look at the new goal, increase city capacity to manage the homeless priorities, I wondered if that was more of a technical back office position, or if that was really the frontline person who is coordinating between agencies for real-time specific issues that we're facing right here and now.
I think it's going to be more that the homelessness principle is going to be more the back office, and then once the frontline folks identify problems or challenges, then that homelessness principle is calling, flood, or he's calling Jim Wheeler, or they're calling somebody over at mental health to talk about the challenges with the Met team. But I think it will probably be somebody else on the ground for the coordination, but we have to work through that.
I'll just stress again, we need this position, we need that enforcement of both, as we talked about in the past, the carrot and the stick. And I'm a very compassionate person that cares about the homeless deeply, but I understand that we need that additional piece. And so I'm going to keep pushing for this. I know some of my colleagues agree, but that position that coordinates all of those different agencies within the city and then also outside is really critical in my mind at this point, especially with this significant investment we're making with the new navigation center.
Thank you, Councilmember Gonzalez. I want to also emphasize that point. Homelessness is the #1 priority of our constituents. We hear that when we talk at the state level with big city mayors. It is clearly the #1 priority. When the governor speaks about the #1 priority of the state, it is homelessness. And so we are on an ongoing basis getting feedback from our constituents, and we need to figure out how to respond to this issue on both ends. So it is both in regards to the homeless persons and being able to get them into the appropriate services, as well as the impact of homelessness on our businesses and residents. But throughout the day, throughout the night, we are getting calls. I get calls at night. I'm sure council members are also. It's on social media. So it doesn't stop just during 8 to 5. So that it just becomes a greater challenge because this is, it's such a major issue that is impacting us on multi-levels. So just to reinforce what Councilmember Gonzalez said. And now Vice Mayor, please.
Thanks, Mayor. I agree with everything that Andre and the Mayor said. With that staff position, totally agree with Andre in that that person needs to be not only a coordinator, but a driver too. That helps with the heat maps, consolidation of our stakeholders, and is constantly engaged, just not a person in an office, shuffling paper, but somebody that is engaged daily with this issue. And I also agree, Andre called it carrot and stick, I'll call it tough love, but I agree that we have to have that component, and part of that component is going to have to be transportation, because even though we make these contacts, these people sometimes are going to be far from the shelters, and they're going to have a means to get there. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Also a question, we made a commitment that we would make sure that the neighborhoods surrounding the shelters are safe. And now with the M Street Navigation Center, what do we do there in responding to make sure, not responding actually, and being proactive to make sure that the neighborhood is at a quality that is desirable?
Yeah, it's not reflected here, but in our PSVS proposed budget that we'll bring back in the next few weeks, it includes those neighborhood improvements that council mentioned at the approval of the purchase of the property for the navigation center. And what we did in that, if you look at those neighborhoods, there is some fairly significant needs. So we tried to balance the level of need with what was a really good first step to make sure that there's access and safety and a sprucing up of those neighborhoods. I think frankly as staff we looked at it and said, we'd like to do some more next year as well, but we have about $300,000 for each site in infrastructure improvements to make in this next year to get us farther along that path. That we think down the road we would probably even make some more, but that is in next year's proposed budget, as well as that's been a big component of our conversations with Mercy House at the Navigation Center, is just being good neighbors as well as addressing safety on site and in the neighborhood.
Thank you, Mr. Clegg. Councilmember Smith, do you wish to comment?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. So, I don't see anywhere on here where we're engaged in prevention, and I know, we mentioned the other night, we don't have the data, we don't know what the turnover is, we just know that the number out on the streets is growing. When we talk to the providers, they have great success in moving people into housing and stuff, and so there's people moving in and out of homelessness all the time. And I don't know that it's our job to be involved in prevention, but I do know that we're a member of the collaborative, and maybe we support whoever is involved in that, or we somehow report what's happened all the way from when people become homeless to when they on the backside when they get housed. And so I would like also some focus on that and some data and some feedback.
Yeah, I appreciate that comment because there's a whole continuum of services that needs to be available to help with the homeless population. I think Councilmember Gonzalez pointed that out when we had the presentation on Wednesday from the point in time count. And this homelessness principle, I really view them as the designated warrior on this topic, because Jackie's awesome and she is aware of all of these topics, but she also has a million other things to think about. This homelessness principle, they're thinking about what are all the specific things that need to be happening on homelessness. And so I would say to the comments also from Wednesday about the data and the HMIS system and are we tracking the right things, that homelessness principle, they're going to be on the continuum saying, hey, you getting those numbers in your system? Are we tracking according to those numbers? I think also paying attention if there's a gap in the full spectrum of services, maybe the city's not the provider, but that homelessness principle is watching that and saying, hey, here's where we have gaps, here's what the city could do, here's what we would advocate for the continuum to do. So I think these are all really good comments, and taking some notes about this. I think we'll have our homelessness principal, come up with some thoughts about what should those prevention, actions be for the city specifically. And then the final point I would make is that the CARES Act stimulus dollars, we're still confirming, how those dollars will flow to us and how many they will be. But one of the priorities of the state for spending the federal stimulus dollars that come from the state is around homelessness. And so we may have some opportunities to think about supplementing some of this outreach or some of these programs we're talking about, at least on a temporary basis from the CARES funding, sort of as a pilot or some seed money, in addition to the significant investments the city's made on the PSVS side on this.
So, Mr. Clegg, we are advocating with the big city mayors for greater flexibility with that funding, and also I've been in touch with our Congressman's office on the same issue.
Thank you, Mayor.
Anything else related to this section on homelessness, colleagues? I don't see any requests to speak. Okay, let's go on.
All right, just a quick time check. I think public safety and homelessness are our biggest goals, and so I anticipated more conversation on those. But we're 1 hour into our 3 hours, and we've done a fourth of our goals, but I think we'll be okay. I think if we could push through a couple more, and then maybe we take a break. Okay, fiscal solvency. The good news is the city has put away this fiscal year towards reserves. We anticipate meeting the reserve goals for next year as well from our PSVS allocation. I've added 2 elements there. I think because of the pension challenges that we foresee in the future, one tool that is available to municipalities is what's called a pension trust fund. It allows us to set those funds aside. We don't give them to CalPERS early. We set them aside on our own. We can actually accrue interest on those. And then that's a pot of money that's available to us to make those CalPERS payments as they kind of come up and down, but particularly when they're in those high years, we've set aside funds on an ongoing basis so that in those years where there's a big CalPERS payment, we're not taking a hit from our operating dollars. The second piece there is that I think our reserve policy is a good policy, but I think it's worth taking a look at it during this next year just for an update on what are our benchmarks, as well as there can be different funding categories within a reserve policy. And I think not just working cash, you need a working cash reserve because that's just a good business practice. But you should also have risk-based contingency for what just might happen. And a third bucket that I've seen in reserve policies is for what we call a known contingency. What that means is, an example we have in Bakersfield is we know we're going to need to replace our finance system. We're in the analysis phase of that. Just to be clear for council, that is a multi-million-dollar expense. We're talking $20 million, plus or minus. So in any 1 year, that's a pretty big chunk. So if you start setting aside monies for that in advance as a known contingency, then you're ready to make that expenditure when the time comes. That's just one example, but if we have known costs that are 5-10 years out, kind of like our facilities replacement reserve, then we can start putting those away in our general reserves as well. So those are just a couple thoughts on updating our reserve policy. Then on modernizing and enhancing financial systems, again, I noted the ERP, or Enterprise Resource Planning, that's our core finance tool. We're continuing to move forward on that project. We'll have that feedback back from the GFOA pretty soon. But I would recommend a couple of other pieces here. One is having a long-range financial forecasting tool. These are becoming more and more common in cities. I know at least here in California, and I think a few nationally. And instead of looking out, 1 year, 2 year, even 5 years, because Bakersfield has done a good job of having a 5-year forecast. This is a 20-year forecasting tool that helps you think about the impacts that we make, of the decisions we make today. If we add another 100 positions through PSVS over the next couple of years. How do we make sure we pay for those positions 10 and 20 years from now? And it gives you a nice visual modeling to help you in your decision making. And it's actually a pretty affordable tool. These tools you can have built for you for probably somewhere between $20,000 and $40,000. Then a risk assessment. This is also a typical practice for municipalities where you have an audit firm come in and they'll take a look at 15 to 16 risk factors that are present in most cities, and they give us a sense of where we're doing a pretty good job and where we might be a little bit soft. And so then we can create some programs and some policies to address where we might have some risk. That's both financial risk, but as well as some of our performance risk. It's not about legal risk, it's more on the performance and financial side. And then I've been hearing a lot about legislative advocacy, so I added an action item here. I do think that is a fiscal solvency perspective because it helps us to be proactive in getting funds, but it also helps us be proactive in not having things done to us that are negative. And so I would look to develop some documents that are position statements from the City Council about what are the policies and positions on key topics. Would look at having legislative advocacy services available to us on the state side. And then this is also where I would look at having a little more of a citywide focus on grant opportunities. And then the final piece here is what I'm calling an Efficiencies initiative. I've mentioned this in some of our public meetings as well as in one-on-one meetings. I think there are some significant opportunities for some modernization of some of our processes and use of some technology as well as other tools to just get more efficient. And we've got a lot of paper processes that we could turn into electronic processes and other things. And so as an overarching area, I would like to create sort of an efficiencies team within the city and possibly move towards an efficiency study. That can be done internally, but you can also have external folks come in and help take a hard look at some of the areas of the city. And then some of these other elements are initiatives that our departments have already been planning on. We've been working on increasingly going paperless. Our risk division is already planning to do an analysis of our claims history to see if there's patterns that we can get ahead of. Our Treasury unit is planning on looking at business licenses and seeing if there's some patterns there that are important. And then we have some financial or some technology tools that are already kind of in the queue that are going to help us to get more efficient. So that's a new bucket that I would like to just kind of raise up in emphasis for city staff, is to continue to think about where do we find efficiencies. Even with new resources, we have to continue to get better, smarter, faster, and stretch our dollars as far as we can. So I'll pause there.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Christian, on legislative advocacy, I think that's extremely important. Our area via Sacramento continually takes a hit with oil and ag, but right now when you're talking about all the COVID dollars that are potentially going to be floating around, and other cities our size that have a strong lobbying group that compete regularly in this arena, and we need to be in that arena too. And I've just added that I don't know how soon we can do it, but I think this is something that would be prudent for us to get involved as soon as possible.
If I could really quickly, here's what I'm thinking, but open to council feedback on this one. I think having a contract legislative advocate leverages a lot of aspects. One, they already know Sacramento, they already have all the connections. Really where things happen in Sacramento is not always on the assembly floor or the Senate floor, although those votes are important, but it's largely with these committees that they have at the state level, and these committees are staffed by staffers, and they write the language. And these advocates know all the committee chairs and committee staffers, and they go in and they work with them. to get the right language put into these bills before it, even moves far down the trail. And so they also help get with departments at the state level. When there's a grant or something, they can get us access to folks who can get on the phone and talk about, how do we make sure that we write our grant application in a way that's going to, put us in our best position. So I would recommend pursuing legislative advocacy through a contract, but then have an individual assigned in the city manager's office as the lead that manages that contract, manages that relationship, and is also assigned to support the mayor through the big city mayor's process, and is basically watching all of these issues come down and being very proactive about it. One of our challenges on the staffing side is, I think, even in the city manager's office, stretched a bit thin on assignments, and so there's, while in a perfect world, I think we would have even other considerations for this next year because things are tight. We're looking at proposing just one position ad in the city manager's office for an assistant to the city manager who would have this specific responsibility around legislative advocacy, grants, and probably some of the strategic planning elements as well, because I see them all being interconnected. And then they would be working on these issues very proactively and not as just sort of an ancillary assignment. So with those two components in place, that one position that can really focus on it, and a state legislative advocacy contract, they can develop this platform to bring to council and then stay up on all of these issues. On the federal side, some cities will also have a federal lobbyist. Federal lobbyists are different than the state because you don't use them week in and week out. Usually a federal issue comes up once every couple of months, and when it comes, it's usually a pretty big one. But I think given the positioning of our federal delegation, I think we're pretty well covered, and I don't think we need to spend dollars on a federal advocate. But on the state side, I think that we do.
Vice Mayor?
I know that priorities, all of them are priorities. But I think this is one that, again, the world that we live in right now with the pandemic, that I think that should be something we focus on pretty quickly. Thanks.
Mr. Clayton, in addition to all of the various listings that you said about the benefits of the having an advocate up there, we know that so often it's being in the hallway, it's being at the restaurant at the right time where the influence actually happens. So having somebody up in Sacramento is critically important. Councilmember Freeman.
Somewhere in the activities under the finance section here of sustainable operations, I'd like us to include getting, maybe it's a study, it's an analysis, I asked for a year and never got it, of our pension obligation, and simply to be able to quantify a couple of charts over the next, whatever it is, 15 years. But here's how it's growing and here's why. So we have, I know it's a projection, you make some assumptions, you do a projection, but here's kind of what it looks like, and here's the difference between post-pepper employees and classic employees. And here's when I've been told the bulge will go over someday, just don't ask me when. Well, I want to ask when. Is that 10 years out? Is that 12? We need to see the curve. It's old math. You can see the area under the curve. Well, that's the nut we got to crack. And if we become aware of it, we have a much better chance of meeting those obligations, finding solutions. When we keep it in the fog so nobody can talk about it, it's very frustrating. You don't know if we're in Insolvent City. You never know. So we need to get a handle on that, and with that, a better understanding of what's, we're going to come back and say, well, we under budgeted again, CalPERS. They did pepper without checking that they weren't making enough money to pay the new pepper one. And now we're already, I did get numbers, we're accruing unfunded stuff on the post-pepper from day one. The whole thing is a boondoggle. But we got to pay it, and we need to get a handle on the resources we'll need to understand this, so we can budget and so we can meet our obligations, just so we know. I would rather have us get to a point where this city, I think Captain Parley said, that we're a solid, solvent financial city and more attractive to move here for public safety, recruiting, and for businesses and everybody else. Hey, this is one city that's got its act together and knows what's going on and can pay the bills, which other cities are all screaming, I don't know it. Well, it's within our power to at least know what we have to meet and hopefully build a plan to get there. So I'd like that to get addressed this year.
We can do that, and I think we can, there's two pieces to it. I think in the short run, we can provide information and data around that. In the more midterm, this long-term financial forecasting tool I discussed, one of the assumptions that you include in that forecasting tool is the pension and post-obligation, post-employment obligations. And so it's designed to show you a really nice graph that shows you when you're going to have those bulges. And so it's a really nice tool that will, on an ongoing basis, just plug in a few numbers to adjust the assumptions, and it spits out a graph to show us, where we are headed and what we're looking at. Because you have mentioned pensions, let me just take a quick moment. I've been having lots of conversations with sort of community members and folks because we're in a constricted time frame this year with the budget, and we've had to pivot, and it's a weird timing and it's a weird process because of COVID. I've been reaching out to key folks individually just to make sure there's some feedback and some voice in this process, because we're going to be moving so fast on the workshops. And folks are talking about pensions. And to your point, Councilmember Freeman, we have to pay it. When I was in Stockton, we declared bankruptcy, and one of the options on the table was, do we impair pensions? We had cut staffing, we had cut programming, we had reduced staff total compensation significantly. It was out of market, but we had reduced staff compensation significantly. And people were hoping that Stockton would be the first to go and tell CalPERS, we're going to impair you. But we looked really, really hard at it. And as soon as you impair with CalPERS, you, from a business perspective, you're at a incredible competitive disadvantage, because no police officer wants to come work for an organization that doesn't have a competitive pension compared to other municipalities up and down the state. And so I just, I want to be clear with the council and the community that pension reform is a topic that should be of interest to every city manager in the state. Pension reform is important. The liabilities of CalPERS and the way that they just keep changing their projections and discount rates, it's killing us all. But unless it's addressed systemically, the one or two cities that try to lead out on that, they're going to have incredible retention and recruitment challenges. So I want to be clear that we can advocate for smart fiscal sustainability, but in the interim, we need to make sure that we're prepared to pay our pension obligations, because that's how we employ our workforce. I'll leave it at that for now. I just wanted to make that quick point.
Councilmember Gonzalez, then Councilmember Sullivan.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to thank staff for including that activity of establishing a Section 115 pension trust fund. I think that's a good way to reinforce our response for future CalPERS payments. So thank you. It's something we talked about in the past. I'm glad we finally see it in this document. The other thing I wanted to mention is I really appreciate the efficiency initiative. And I just wanted to point out in the justification and add, in the justification, it states that we're doing this to organize a city initiative to identify opportunities for organizational efficiencies that will save costs or allow for employees to redeploy their time to more meaningful activities. That's great. I would ask that we add also to provide better service delivery to our constituents, because ultimately that's what we're trying to get at. And there are many ideas that we've talked about in the past, for example, parks, online reservations, as opposed to requiring people to actually physically show up in the Parks Department. Building permits, how do we streamline that process, make it more efficient? But ultimately, it's to deliver better services for our customers and constituents. And so I think we need to keep an eye towards that.
I like it. Thank you.
Councilmember Sullivan.
Thank you, Mayor. There's been some good dialogue, just the last few comments, but just understanding the budget issue, the benefit issue is very important, and having figures, and those have been available to us in the past, but yet it helps in our negotiating, but also the comments we're able to make. It helps our constituents understand what we're up against. We love our public safety. We need more employees, yes, but yet there needs to be a balance, and us understanding and having some benchmarks that we can simply use in our dialogue will help the community, because it's not as easy as it sounds, and we do have a problem with our benefits. So that's important for us to completely more understand as decision makers, but also in the end it will help our community to become more aware of just what we're up against. And bringing on a new employee is great for now, but then it's a responsibility from now on because of all the benefits. So that will help just awareness, and that would be good.
Yeah, I think good points made, and the more information we have, the better decisions we can make, and the better we can communicate about those. And so I think some of these tools will get us more regular information.
Thank you, Mr. Clegg. I'm going to go to Councilmember Smith, and then we'll take a break after this section unless anybody else has further comments on this section. Councilmember Smith?
Yes, thank you. The establish a fund, section 115 pension trust fund, I think that's great. We talked about that a lot with Measure N, and I'm glad to see that is on there specifically. On the pensions, I would reinforce what Councilman Freeman said. He's asked, I've heard him numerous times for some years to see a graph, what really are the pensions, what are the real numbers, and we've never seen that. And I think it's good in two ways. It's good for planning, but it's also, something that is invisible and not defined is much scarier than something that can be defined and you figure out ways to address it. So I'd much rather have a defined problem than an invisible, we have this terrible problem out there. So I also would like to see that. And on the advocacy, I know Councilmember Harley has pushed for that for quite some time, and I'm glad to see that on there and to move forward with that. On the efficiency initiative, I would reinforce again what Councilman Gonzalez said, that, efficiency is great, but it's really about the culture and the services that we want to provide. As a council member, over the years, it's always easier for staff to say, no, we can't do that. We don't have enough people, we don't have enough time, that's not possible. And as a developer, somebody who's processed stuff through the city for 30 plus years, as the city has grown and the bureaucracy has grown, it's become much, much, much more difficult to get stuff through the city of Bakersfield. And what used to be a small town, make it happen attitude has become, I'm too busy, I can't do that, I can't get to it, and just saying no and not saying, no, but why don't you try this? No, maybe this works, or we've seen this happen before. There's just not overall, make it happen, how we serve the community attitude a lot of times. So, yes, efficiency, but also culture is part of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Smith. And yes, we are public servants. So I'm just kind of thinking overall, when the public reads any of these documents, if they can see how they are impacted, the wording, so we're responding to them as the customer rather than exactly what we're doing. And of course, there are going to be those details, but people should always be able to see the benefit to the public. So
I think those comments are consistent with things that I've heard over my first few months. I think some of that is reflected in goal number 7, and pieces of that are cultural, as well as, I think, as I've communicated about this being a community in transition, it's also an organization in transition, and I think as a city organization, we're still learning how to be a big organization, but still a very citizen-focused organization. And there's some growing pains in that, and I think there's opportunities with economies of scale of being a bigger city and a bigger organization, that we can use, some technology tools and efficiencies, but also, we have to circle back, and it's actually not, I don't view it as a project that you do once and it's done. This is a dilemma to manage, that you have to regularly come back to customer service trainings and onboardings and culture, because you're always getting new employees, and you're also, kind of there's swings in busyness, and so I think it's just an issue we have to always focus on, I guess, is the final point there.
thank you, Mr. Clegg. Let's take a 12-minute break,
12 minutes.
and we'll be back here. All right. Okay, well, welcome back from our break, and let's continue, Mr. Clegg.
Yeah, and I would let council know that I was thinking that we were going to have some food provided towards the end, but that is not the case, and so I'm going to move quickly to make sure we're done and timely enough, and Jackie is going to help look up some local restaurants we can recommend to patronize as they reopen this weekend. So, goal number 4. What I would say about this goal, in general terms, as well as sort of picking up the pace a little bit on some of these goals, for our projects, we have a number of projects that will show up in the budget, and so we didn't list every one of those projects here in these listings, but for example, we have the Prop 68 grant for the Little Brahma Park. We did receive a $3 million grant for the next phase of the Kaiser Permanente Sports Village. That would require a $3 million match from the city, but when we're getting that $3 million, we don't want to let go of those funds. And then there are several also neighborhood park projects. We have 3 neighborhood playground rehabs. We have some safety and access improvements at one of our local parks, as well as lighting improvements to the skate park at Beach Park. And so we've completed many projects that were on the list from our CIP this last year. These larger park projects, of course, we're calling those in progress because there's several phases to those. I think one notable item is that the park's security camera project. As we were looking hard at our PSVS budgets, that was one area that because of our reductions in the current year to our TOT, I think it's TOT, is that right, Chris? Yeah, from our TOT, that is one project that we didn't have funding to complete this year, and so we're looking at some opportunities to start that next year, but it won't be as much as we want to do just because of funding constraints. And then on the downtown streetscape and wayfinding, a similar challenge there, but we did propose downtown landscaping and banner program in next year's CIP budget, but those fell out of this year's. And then to wrap out towards the end there in 4.5, We're going to continue to work on all of these water issues on an ongoing basis. Of course, the river restoration project report is completed. And then I've added another element here at the end that I think around the Groundwater Management Act, there's some opportunities to pursue a little more education and advocacy around that to help folks understand the importance of water running in the river and recharge, given some of those issues. And then if you turn to page 16, it's actually one new element to this goal number 4, and that is I've heard from just about everybody I've talked to about addressing just cleanup, litter, weeds, trash, principally in city gateways, but then also thoroughfares and into our neighborhoods. And so I would like to recommend adding an initiative here where it would have multiple components. One of those is to fund additional cleanup crews by contract next year. We're going to propose $1.5 million in the PSBS budget to do that citywide. And our thinking around that would be to do an RFP and see if we could have maybe even two or three different, am I off here? There we go. 2 or 3 different entities that could cover the citywide functions, but then also have some additional projects that we do internal to the city to help us just think about how do we clean up the city. This Eyes and Ears program, other cities have done this where they talk with police officers and parks crews and solid waste haulers and help them make sure they know how to report certain things and get more of the feedback. If folks are out in the community, let's make sure we're getting reports back of where we need to tidy things up. As well as just looking at our Adopt a Park and Adopt a Street programs and work on the public-private partnerships to make sure that we're also leveraging as many other entities, like Keep People Feel Beautiful, to get at this Clean City initiative. I think there will be more department activities that we'll add underneath there, but just in concept, I wanted to highlight that that's something we want to lift up as a city program or project.
Thank you. Councilmember Gonzalez.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate staff's work on all of these items. Last year we focused on and we made some investments in the regional parks, which is great, and I supported that. But I think it's really important for us to turn our attention to neighborhood parks, and especially neighborhood parks in the urban core, especially parks that don't qualify for CDBG funding, which is how we've funded a lot of those improvements over the past for many of our urban parks. These are the oldest parks in our city. Many of them are historic in nature. I'm thinking of Jastrow Park. There was an article in the Californian just a few days ago about the need to make some significant improvements to Jastrow Park and some of the assets there. And I think that it would be a real shame if our city neglects continues to neglect those parks and really does not take the opportunity to make some investment there. So I hope my colleagues would join me in supporting some effort to focus in on those parks that are older, or in the urban core, and there are no other funding sources available. And if I had to prioritize, I would put Jastrow Park at the top of that list, and then Saunders Park as number 2. Both happen to be in my ward, but our area, our parks that really have significant needs and have not been invested in over the last couple of years. I mean, I don't want to overstate the point. There have been some improvements in Jastrow, but I think there is a lot of need there, even still.
Beale Park also needs attention just in the band shell, the amphitheater with the lighting. That's been problematic, and it's an amenity that many in our community use. So let's make sure we address that.
I appreciate that, Mayor. If I may, just one more comment about Beale. In this year's budget, we have funding allocated for the reconstruction of new restrooms, and that's something that we've been working on for a number of years. And so in this update, it indicates that those restrooms will be done in the spring of this year, and we're almost at the end of May, and I don't think we've even started construction yet. So I really want to press staff to get that project done. And if you can give us an update, you're not here, but we mean weekly, get a weekly report. Appreciate it.
Councilmember Freeman.
Yeah, I guess I'm sort of agreeing with the need to address the existing park equally to building new sports parks. We've already built them. We have many phases done. I think that's great. But I really don't like to see prioritizing, expanding, if it's millions of dollars. A soccer park that already has 12 fields to make it 18 or whatever. If the existing parks, which are everywhere, are in need of repair. So I know you have to hire a new park director. Director Delby, this one's retiring in a few days, I think. Or was at the end of May, she told me.
So Diane had initially intended to retire. She has decided to postpone that, but I think it is, it will be a timely issue in this next year, I'm sure.
Oh, okay, but anyway, I think a task that really needs to be raised to a goal, or certainly an action item, is we need an inventory of repairs for every park we have. You can do it with a one-page form, whether the equipment is the playground equipment replaced, broken sprinklers, broken this, just each one, so we have a little form analysis, this is what is needed in existing parks, they call it deferred maintenance, and that we need to schedule how soon can we get this fixed, because I get calls about it, I go, no, you're right, that rubber mat is now deteriorated, kids can't play on it anymore, it's just all over because parks wear out, the equipment wears out. But if we had an inventory of all our public parks, and here's the things that need to be done, then it may take 3 years to do them. But they would be an action item that we're going to get these done this year. And it might be there might be 20 parks that get something this year that take funds for existing parks. The other thing is we almost need the same kind of inventory of landscaping on the arterials, which are the gateways to our city, that everybody sees and judges the look of our community from the arterials, not from the locals. And a lot of them look, back in the drought, apparently we just let we let a lot of plants die, never replace them, never fix the irrigation, and there are areas all over town. You'll get 200 yards of just dirt, even in Seven Oaks. Where, we just let it die during the drought and never replaced it, we were too broke. The truth, it did die. And it will take a while. It might, it easily take us 3 years to fill in right on existing arterials where people drive down to fix these. So that just, again, you need a list to know where they are so that you can slowly get these things done. And I don't think we have such a list. And drive down Panama Lane, one block looks good, the next looks horrific. It's only 3 years old. So we need to address that.
Yeah, in response to both of those comments, I know on the park side, reading through some of their objectives for this next year, there was some inventory on their department priority list. But we'll go back and talk with them and ensure that it's inventory across the board. And then on the arterials and the landscaping, I think with the PSBS project, there was a lot of replantings this year. Replantings do take, that water maintenance as well. And so it's actually something on my mind. And if council has some feedback on this, I'd be open to that now. It may be worth a committee conversation, because what should landscaping look like in our climate, and do we continue to invest in trying to replant the way things were historically, or do we look at, you know, a little more of a drought-resistant landscaping because of some of those ongoing, you know, watering challenges? I think, you know, we can try and, you know, promote whatever look we want to, but sometimes it comes with, you know, cost implications of the watering.
Most of the plants throughout the city are drought tolerant. Every privet hedge is a drought. Those are drought tolerant plants. So we pretty much have that. Maybe not every one, but pretty much already. It's just, I think stuff died because it wasn't watered at all, which is one of the reasons we had to replace so many trees. Is trees just, if you don't water the tree, it immediately loses its immune system, gets disease, and you can't bring it back. So there's just, you know, it isn't so much the wrong plants. There may be some. It's really just, you know, like cleaning up your yard, getting sprinklers working, replacing the dead plants, trimming them up. It's just kind of a cleanup that it's the impression that everyone who drives into Bakersfield sees. They drive down our boulevards and they don't look like the word boulevard. They don't look good. And they go back to, yeah, they're just kind of an ugly place. Because that's what I saw driving through. I got off the freeway after it was full of weeds and trash. Then I drove down Panama Lane, White Lane, looked terrible for 5 miles. I don't want to live here. It is a big image problem because it is the truth of what a lot of our city looks like. But those are fixable things. We have to devote resources, but those are controllable, fixable things that we need to eventually, you know, fix this up so we look better.
Thank you, Councilmember Freeman. Vice Mayor, then Councilmember Sullivan.
Ready? Good? All right. No?
It's been
I'm sorry, hello, something just happened to the connection. I heard some static and now I don't hear anything.
You're okay, we're having technical problems.
I lost contact on that.
It better be really good if I start.
Are you there, Bob? Can you hear us, Bob?
Thank you.
We're just talking about bicycles.
Good time to get me off, huh?
Well, it is good, Andre, because I was going to layer in on top of what you said about the parks and Saunders Park that borders my area. I totally agree with you. And right now, Tripp has everything tore up around Saunders. Maybe there's an opportunity as we rebuild Tripp back that we maybe, I know Jasper's important to you too, but focus on Saunders a little bit with our rebuilding efforts with Tripp there. I've actually fielded some complaints regarding homeless and some other things, so I think there's an opportunity there. When it comes to weed abatement, what Bruce said, beautification of the city, using potential resources from our homeless community that we've done with the freeway litter cleanup, and weed abatement too. You know, this is weed season, and last year at this time, a little later in the season, I guess, I had an auto mall dealership that lost over $2 million in inventory because of Caltrans, not maintaining the freeways. And I know it's, I think it's 6 or something when we're talking about it, but I'm just going to jump ahead to what Bruce said. You do judge a book by its cover. People coming into the community that never get off the freeway, judge Bakersfield by that. We spent $40,000 a little over a year ago to invest in irrigation and signage on a approximately 15-foot block wall that continually gets graffitied. The vines are doing great, but the weeds there are now as high as that dais, and you hardly can see them. And I'm sure it's affecting the growth of the vines too. Same with the Hosking interchange. That was built during a drought year, and all the landscaping was stripped out of it. And it's the newest ramp in the city of Bakersfield, and hopefully at some point we're going to have a big project there with the Gateway project. But that ramp looks like it's been there for 50 years and is in terrible condition. And there was branding, some signage, and Chris, you might have an idea on this, that was approved. We allocated the money a while back, and I don't know, is that still to do that bridge treatment?
Vice Mayor, the latest update I have is that we're working with Caltrans. There was an issue with what was proposed to be placed on that the interchange, the overpass, because there's a monument sign just a little bit further south, and there's some Caltrans policy, at least we're being told, that it doesn't allow for both, but we're trying to elevate that at this point because we see that as two complementary points of entry and signage. So I will get an update for you, but that was the last that I had at that one.
Okay, I mean, if it takes reaching out to our state representatives to try and fix this or something, because I've seen other cities, like Elsinore comes to mind, where they have, that sort of thing too, and it doesn't seem to be a problem in some areas, other areas of the state, but when it comes to Bakersfield, there seems to be a lot of resistance. Caltrans, I've met with the area director about 8 months ago, and it was a very nice, cordial lunch. But the bottom line is that they deflect as far as their maintenance. And I don't know if we'll have to develop a maintenance agreement. I know, talking to staff, they don't necessarily think, it would just be something added to our plate. But again, when you judge a city, driving through Bakersfield, and as you go through, not talking about other areas like the 58 and stuff, but primarily 99, where it's sunken, and you don't see the city, primarily, and it looks terrible. So we need a plan. In fact, Christian, we talked about going out and reviewing a few sites in my area, and there's a trip area between Wilson and Ming right now that is the upslope of that ramp. It's just a no man's zone. There's no plans for trees or beautification, at least when I talk to Caltrans about that. I mean, they might stick a tree or two, but there's not a plan. Getting back to what Bruce said, there's just not a plan. And right now it's overtaken by weeds and tumbleweeds. So I think we need to address that. Last thing is the security cars, getting at park safety. Downtown, I know with our contractor, we did some signage, a little branding, and I think it's good. In fact, I saw one just the other day, a security car, and it had that branding on it, the city branding. And I knew that, okay, that's what we're paying for. They're out and about. Instead of just some car that, general person from the public may not be aware. If you're in a park and you see a security car, you need some sort of, services or want to report something. So we do it downtown, and if we don't do it for the park cars too with our contractor, maybe we can do that also. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Councilmember Sullivan.
Did you say Sullivan now?
Yes.
And honestly, that Thank you. Bruce, your point was very good. Okay. I am thinking that we need someone responsible for keeping track of the good, bad, and the ugly. We should not have any ugly. Things that are high visibility and that are ugly, they need to be, in a couple of hours, in a couple of days, they need to be taken care of. As an example, getting on at Ming Avenue, getting on the freeway going north, the weeds are that high on that on-ramp. And I have thought before, gosh, I'll come out here and I'll pull the weeds myself in 30 minutes. Things that are so doable, that do have high visibility, it's just it's unnecessary. And it makes our city look, it's discouraging, and it just, it's not necessary. And I just went to the ladies' bathroom. The Formica, cheap Formica on the sink top. I don't know if it's the original back in 1950 or what, but that people come from all over town to top entertainment in our city, our convention center, this beautiful facility that we have. And the Formica needed to be identified 5 years ago, needing to be replaced. And before we open up our convention center again, we need to have it replaced. Things like that are noticeable, that are way below what should be our city standard, that's easily fixable, but that's high priority. And, you know, I love our convention center, I love our city, but if I was coming from out of town or even from across town for a nice evening's entertainment, I think, wow, this place is a wreck, you know, and it makes the whole place. So please put that down, and within the next couple of weeks, that needs to be fixed.
So, again, all good feedback. I think these are things that, you know, staff all agrees with. And some of these, you know, there are several projects at the arena that are in queue from capital improvement projects for this year. There will be a few more that we'll propose for next year. We may have to remember this conversation when we get to the budget side, and we're having some folks saying, don't spend money on the arena, we want it in these other areas. But the hard part is there is demand, you know, all over. I would say a couple things about the demand for fixing things up and getting things looking better. You know, kind of to my points on May 6th when we did a little introduction to our revenues that were coming. As an outsider coming in, my observation is that this organization has been on very stretched budgets for more than a decade. And when you go a decade or more deferring maintenance, there's some catch-up to do. And I think all the catch-up that council is communicating, I agree with you. We got to do all this stuff. Some of that catch-up will have to have some pacing. I mean, the good news is we have resources to get at this. Even amidst COVID, we're going to have some resources to get at this. But we will have to pace ourselves. I think creating these inventories is a fantastic idea. I think there's some of those pieces in the works, but getting them more comprehensive and getting them dialed in is going to be an important initiative. I have that down. We'll have to pick certain things to do first, and then we'll have to pick some other things, you know, to do next, because that much deferral is going to take some time. I think specifically on the entryways, the on-ramps and off-ramps, we've got to have a different relationship with Caltrans. I mean, I've heard this across the board that, you know, they may be pressured to, and they may have all these deflections, but, you know, for them to be good partners, especially when we're investing dollars right next to a Caltrans site, you know, from the city side to make things look nice, and then right next to it, it doesn't look nice. I've taken that as a special note with a couple of stars next to it on the Caltrans relationship. I think this Clean City initiative is going to take multiple different partners, and part of it being an initiative is that it's not just city staff doing the work, it's how do we come up with a comprehensive plan to get at this stuff with other partners as well. So these are all really good pieces of feedback, and we'll add these to our notes, and it's, you know, something we have to get at all the time.
Councilmember Sullivan.
Yes, and Chris, for years, driving from the Grapevine up even to Fresno, things can look pretty good, and then driving through our area of Bakersfield looks very bad. And it's not fair.
Well, it is something that absolutely should be addressed with Caltrans, especially. I hear you. That is not fair. One of the things that I forgot to mention earlier, just about the resource question, is I think that speaks to the importance of the Measure N, and that now that there is Measure N, we can get at some of these deferrals. But I think the fact that, you know, we didn't get to the Formica in the bathroom 5 years ago like we should have. That was a symptom of the structural financial situation of the city, and now with Measure N, we can correct that, but we've got some catching up to do.
Okay, one more comment. Christian, regarding the bathroom, things like that. To me, there's no excuse in it, because that's not a huge project. We're not talking about new drapes or anything like that that's huge that you have to budget for. That's getting one of our maintenance men and going to Home Depot, and so things like, it should never be that type of thing. Visibility in our beautiful convention center should never again be that, put off that wall, ignored. And it should never again be that bad. It's been getting badder and badder for years. And I wish on the way out you just peek your head in there and see what I'm talking about.
If you go in and clear it before I go in, sure.
Yeah, right. But please do, because that is high. That's really, really high visibility. And I'd forgotten how bad it was. But things like that, there should be no excuses. Someone should just be responsible for making sure that things never get that bad in something like this beautiful convention center.
Thank you. Vice Mayor?
As long as we're talking about the convention center, and I think it's already been allocated, the funds, the carpet out here, well, basically everywhere, is, when's that teed up?
Vice Mayor, good news. Actually, we're going to be, I think, bringing that to the City Council for award on the second meeting in June. Is the timeline right now for the meeting room refurbishment and carpet work. Just got that word in a couple minutes ago.
Well, hopefully we can use a wonderful Bakersfield vendor to complete the job. Thank you.
Councilmember Smith?
Thank you. Just a couple comments. I think, number one, enhanced quality of life for people that we've seen through this COVID crisis, that our parks and our streetscapes are very important. I walk every night over the river walk, and there's many times the amount of people that are typically there, keeping their social distance, but the amount of the community that is, forced to not go other places. Our parks and our streetscapes are great outlet for them. So it just reinforces the importance of it. And then I just would like to reinforce, the work that we've done for 50 years on getting water in the river, the city's water supply, and how that ties in the Sigma man on groundwater. The city's doing great work, and it's difficult, but always lawsuits and always somebody else take the water. But I think our Janelle, the water department, is doing a great job, and I appreciate that you're going to add this education advocacy, and I think just recently, in this article, leaning towards the water districts, and so we need to get our side of the story out there as much as possible. And again, it's just a great amenity to see. And Clean City Initiative. I think the idea that city employees, the Eyes and Ears program, you would have thought that they would have that already, but we don't. And absolutely, when the police or other people see a problem in the park or a problem somewhere, it should be reported. But everybody would be working towards the same goals. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Smith. Vice Mayor is next.
Well, that was for
Okay.
So-
We're halfway through.
Thank you, Vice Mayor.
Yes, we have 4 goals to go. We're short on time. What I could do is highlight a couple areas that I think that there is, probably a need for more conversation, as well as areas where I can just share some important highlights. And then maybe that allows us to move a little bit quickly. And so I'm going to actually talk about each of the 4 goals really quickly, all 4 of them at high level, and then see if we can just pick where we need to do a little more of the feedback. So goal number 5, this is around strengthening and diversifying our economic base. I've already talked about creating the economic development department distinctly instead of just a division within development services. I think as we create that department, I have put together about an 11-point economic recovery plan. What you see on page 18 on this economic recovery plan just lists 5 of the highlights of that plan, but I think there's about 10 or 11 points that we need to do as a city to help lead towards economic recovery. It's important to recognize that, of course, the city does not control the market. There's also other important partners that we need to have at the table in this effort. And so the city's role in an economic recovery plan is not to do all the economic recovery of our community. It's designed to strengthen and leverage the city's role in that economic recovery. So we want to build a toolkit of economic development incentives that our economic development department can offer to local businesses. We want to streamline and continue to promote our efficient permitting and development process. We also, the $1.5 million I mentioned earlier, I view that as an economic development and workforce development tool to try and put people back to work who may have suffered through COVID to be part of those cleanup crews. And then I think we're going to be able to leverage the county dollars that they have for the stimulus, as well as the federal dollars coming through the state around federal stimulus around this economic recovery plan. So I think both creating that department, deploying an economic recovery plan, and leveraging any of the stimulus monies we can in that. And then I would just also highlight that, of course, we're still moving forward with our SB2 planning grant to help on housing side, as well as our TCC grant on the downtown core. So we're going to keep moving in each of those directions. I think the economic recovery plan is probably worth a workshop item at a future council meeting, and so maybe we don't need to flesh that whole thing out here today. As I mentioned, I have basically a 2-page document with those 10 economic recovery points, and I think we could spend a lot of time at a workshop on that one. For goal number 6 on infrastructure, as you can expect, these are ones that have a little more specific timelines, and so we've completed several projects. We have other projects that are nearing completion, and of course we're going to add in our CIP next year several new projects on each of these elements, both on the city's infrastructure, as well as roads, as well as bicycle and pedestrian. We have many projects that we're applying for ATP and CMAQ monies for. And so through the budget process, we'll bring forward what the recommended projects are for next year, but we'll see new projects in each one of the categories in the infrastructure element. For goal number 7, I've sort of made a suggestion here that it's not just about customer service training, but really about professional development of employees a little broadly. And then, of course, we'll continue to work towards customer service culture and training. But I've added 2 elements there that we've cut training budgets pretty significantly, and the operating budgets for next year is just part of our cost savings measures. Plus, we know folks aren't going to be able to travel to things in this next 6 months. But I do have a $100,000 proposal for what I call an employee development fund, which would allow us to do an internal sort of city university to train our folks internally while we're not able to go to as many trainings and things, and then we'd like to carry that forward into the future so that we have a city university and a wellness program from that development fund. And then I think on an ongoing basis, we want to make sure our employees are engaged with their professional associations. On the marketing element, just 2 quick things. We are going to move forward with an update to our city website, and then I think we've already talked about the image issue of our gateways and the aesthetic improvements, so we've been on that point. Then for goal 8, on the downtown revitalization, the Development Services Department is already looking at developing a low-income rehabilitation program. I would tie that to the economic development incentive tools that I talked about earlier. That's how I would look to fund that. And to the earlier points made, we have our general plan amendment coming forward. We need to have some focus in that on downtown that will connect to the economic development strategy that's going to happen through this next probably 6 months, 6 months after the new fiscal year. And then we have significant dollars still in the budget, not just for downtown but citywide, for affordable housing. Both to have a large allocation out of PSVS for affordable housing for this new year, as well as catch up from last year that was reallocated towards the Navigation Center project. So those are my highlights on the remaining 4 goals, and we can probably just zero in on key points for each of those.
Thank you, Mr. Clegg. I don't see any, Councilmember Gonzalez.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll try to be quick. I'm not sure quite where this will go, but in February I made a referral to staff regarding the establishment of a neighborhood neighborhood traffic calming program and some sort of workbook for our constituents to review, and that will outline various different treatments to calm traffic in various neighborhoods. And so I'd like that to be included in these goals as well for next year. And then also, we can talk about this at a later date, but regarding the downtown piece, I'd like us to look at specific activities that relate to creating incentives for market rate housing and other future developments in the downtown core.
Can you say it one more time? Because the way you said it, I want to note it particularly.
I forgot already, so we have it on camera.
Okay.
But basically, what we're trying to get is to create incentives for market rate housing and other commercial development in the downtown area. So we want to kind of create some catalysts for future development. We already have a goal that establishes doubling the population of downtown over the next now 8 years. But I think we need to identify specific incentives that enhance that opportunity for developers.
Anything else, Councilmember Gonzalez?
That's it.
I don't see any other requests to speak here. Councilmember Smith, do you have anything related to the last 4 items? I don't see hear a response from him. Colleagues, is there anything else that you would like to ask other than when we get to have lunch?
I'm sorry, I was muted. I didn't have to go.
Go ahead.
Try and stay focused here on, I'm cutting short, so I'll just focus on the pedestrian and bicycle improvements. As I mentioned the other night, I think that we need a person focused on the pedestrian and bicycle safety and projects. Personally, each project that gets done seems like I personally have to push it through. I know Councilmember Cartier has worked for many years to get the Pacheco bike path that I helped get funded through PERCOG, and there's nobody at staff that has the passion for the passion to move it forward. And so unless council members push specific projects, nothing happens. And so it would be nice to have somebody on the inside that really follow that stuff through. And again, I don't think it costs the city money. There's millions of dollars every year available for pedestrian and bike improvements that if somebody was focused and working on grants that we'd be able to get. So I just, again, would like to see that. And on the APP list, I spoke with Mr. Clegg about adding, we've got access from the northwest.
Thank you, Councilmember Smith. Vice Mayor.
Thanks, Mayor. We good?
There it goes again. Hold on, Bob. So I just want to capitalize on Bob's comments really quick. I totally agree with having a driver on those grants, Bob, not only for pedestrian bike safety, but also grants in general. That somebody, again, is focused and a driver. I know some departments are really good at grants and others, you know, maybe not so much. But if we had that overall coordinator to make sure those things are processed and constant, I guess, stakeholder outreach to our contract through California Consulting to the grant writing firm. And Bob, I want to thank you so much again for your hard work and heavy lifting for that funding for the bike trail along Pacheco. It wouldn't have happened without you, so thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Colleagues, any other comments?
If I could just add a couple comments based on some of the other comments as well. I'll still make sure they're brief, but add a couple more points with the few minutes that we have. On the bike and pedestrian coordinator, and this is getting a little bit into the budget arena, but this is intended to help us set priorities and reflective of the budget workshops coming forth in the next couple weeks. But we do have room in PSVS to be able to add positions. We're going to come back with a significant number of positions again, not the 123 from last year, but still probably in the 80 to 90 range. We tried to be more conservative this year just because of the economic situation. It's highly prioritized to public safety, of course. More than 2/3 of those positions are public safety. A few positions are going to be proposed around the rapid response teams to continue to get at the quality of life, and then a few support folks in fleet and IT for the growth. We had put in there some positions in public works because there is a genuine capacity challenge there. Trying to be conservative, we had scaled some of that back, but based on the feedback from Councilmember Smith, we kind of went back and rethought about it and retooled a little bit, and we're able to actually think about how we share the costs for a couple of positions across several different funds, because it does influence several different funds. And so we'll be bringing back an analyst, a high-level analyst level position for a bike ed coordinator as a proposal for council consideration, as well as an assistant public works director that has split funding across multiple funds as a proposal for council, to be able to get at this issue of how do we keep on top of these projects. There's just very many projects that we actually are fortunate to be able to do that need a little bit more capacity to get after those grants and to get these projects done. So I'll give Chris, Hua, and Randy credit for being creative and thinking how we can stretch our dollars a little further and find a way to fit those in. And so that'll be in our proposal coming back to council. And then on recovery, just another important quick point is that in PSVS, we're including some new funding streams to be able to build that incentive toolkit for businesses that our economic development team can then deploy to them. We have the economic opportunity area funding still in there. We have redevelopment, property acquisition dollars still in there, as well as this new cleanup contract. And so it's close to $5 million in economic recovery type spending. Compared to the need and the demand in this community, it's not going to, it's not intended to be a budget that's going to serve all the small business needs that are out there. What it's intended to do is to create a team that can help facilitate with some tools the recovery and accessing these federal dollars and state dollars and hopefully city dollars from the big stimulus packages. We want to be able to nimbly access all of those funds. But our team and our economic recovery plan from city funding is largely about creating some key leverage points that we can then leverage bigger dollar amounts. And then the last thing I would just say, this prioritization has been really helpful for us to think about it. I think the proposed budget that we're going to bring forward is reflective of the feedback that we've heard today. We might make a few tweaks based on this. It's definitely going to be an opportunity for us to include some other department activities and measures in response to the feedback today. When we look at our budgets, again, on the general fund side, it's going to be far tighter than the general fund PSVS revenues. And so, we're wanting to be careful and conservative in that. I think as we identify the catching up work that the city has to do, we do have to keep in mind that many of those activities that were funded by just the general fund prior, they were fairly lean, and then as we have this reduction in revenues in the general fund because of COVID, we're doing as much as we can to be efficient and identify savings that we can have in this next year's budget, and we're going to go after those CARES dollars, the stimulus dollars to help supplement our budgets. But I think the more proactive we think about how do we do more things, it speaks to then how do we use those PSVS dollars wisely for PSVS positions, but also, is there the potential that there's a need to help support some of these more traditional general fund activities because of where we're at, in today's times. We're going to come back with a budget that gets us as far as we can towards that. But we want to be able to probably have some contingency built into the PSVS side in case things just, get a little bit worse, or we don't realize all of the stimulus reimbursements that we hope to achieve. So I'm getting a little bit ahead into the workshop materials. We'll talk more about that next Wednesday. But I think we can accomplish many of these goals with the funding that is available next year. We're fortunate to be able to do actual new things when most cities are going to be cutting back, but there will be some pacing to it.
Thank you, Mr. Clegg. I don't see any other requests to speak, so we are adjourned at 12:04.